turning point, or an even more entrenched stalemate? That is the question, now that the Russian command has announced a full-scale evacuation from the city of Kherson. And whilst I do hate to burst everyone's collective bubble of hope, as this is being made quite the meal out of, I think the latter is far more likely than the former. In large part because, to be clear, the evacuation has actually been going on for quite some time already, with civilians being told to leave the city for their own safety, and sometimes it appears they're not just being told but being forcibly removed as well. Russian forces also appear to be requisitioning vehicles like buses, fire engines and police cars. It's even alleged that they are taking historical items along with them, like the bones of the 18th century commander Grigory Potemkin. The recent official announcement, therefore, is little more than formalized bookkeeping, as Russia prepares to sit pretty and far more safely on the other bank of the Dnieper River. And don't get me wrong, this is a Ukrainian victory. No mistake, a major one as well, as a large central Ukrainian occupied city, a regional capital, is being handed back apparently without a fight. But strategically, on a greater war scale, it means very little, at least for the moment. We will get back to that in a bit. But first, let's look at why Russia is abandoning a major regional capital without a fight. It is because they didn't really have a choice. Staying would entail an unacceptable risk to the forces in Kherson, primarily due to their supply situation, and they probably really did want to stay, so they are being forced out of there. Since from a Russian perspective, Kherson was a very valuable city, both as a symbol of Russian success in the early days of the war, and as one of legitimacy, in the form of the regional administration. The city also served as an obvious focus for the Ukrainian forces, who have fought a long and bloody meter-by-meter campaign to advance on the city for the last half a year or so. This attritional style of warfare, in turn, is nearly entirely to Russia's advantage. And for the longest time, it looked like the Russian plan was to entice the Ukrainian army into the city and then wear it down in horrific house-to-house fighting. This was such a concern that even right now, the Ukrainians are not entirely convinced the Russians are leaving. And Zelensky has suggested it may be a Russian plot to get his army bogged down in urban warfare. Though there are reports on social media of at least advanced elements of Ukrainian forces having darted forward to see if there are any Russians in front of them, and getting quite far as well. And again, it would certainly have been to the Russian advantage to try and lay a trap just like that, so the Ukrainian caution is wise. The mobilization troops of Russia are still a good 4 or 5 months away if they are to be trained properly, so the more the current forces can slow things down and, more importantly, bleed Ukrainian manpower, the better. And yet, this Russian plan didn't happen. Barring again a Russian ruse, of course, the retreat does look quite genuine, and has, as mentioned, been going on for quite a while as well. Though few reports of overt military movement has been reported, and Russian talking heads are unusually frank about the situation. Paranoia aside, the most likely reason to abandon Kherson is the simple fact that it is a city on a river that used to be crossed by railway and motor traffic bridges that no longer exist. It has taken the Ukrainian army quite a while to finally reduce the connections to the point of unusability with repeated strikes, and probably only managed to do so with the help of Western high-precision ordnance. But with the links to the other bank destroyed, or nearly destroyed, to the point where it makes no difference, the supply situation of the Russian troops in and around the city would quite quickly grow dire. So it is a prudent move to begin removing them from the city army now before the situation deteriorates too far, and instead reform positions on the other bank while severing all other connections across the Dnieper, which is what appears to be happening right now according to Russian social media. Once again, it looks as if the one military maneuver the Russian army is able to expertly execute is the retreat. Which sounds mean, but no army can remain invincible forever, and so it is a necessary discipline to master. And again, Russia has every interest and intention to see the war drag on right now, and it is no easy feat to disengage from an enemy in the field. Russia deserves praise for this, and Ukraine, honestly, as I strive to be neutral here when I do these videos, deserve a great deal of spanking now for having allowed this to happen thrice. This is now the third time major Russian formations have simply disappeared whilst actively engaged with Ukrainian forces. These are enormous missed opportunities, as a retreating army is a vulnerable army. And Ukraine has been granted the opportunity to exploit that now 3 times, and yet has let it slip through their fingers all 3 times. Now, the first time, with the massive retreat from northern Ukraine, you can argue that it caught them by surprise. And hell, it caught most people by surprise, so fair enough. It was also a brilliantly executed withdrawal, so okay. The second time, Ukraine managed to get a seemingly almost accidental breakthrough a little over a month or so ago that led to enormous gains, but yet again, the majority of the Russian army was able to withdraw and establish new defensive lines. Okay, bit of a missed opportunity, but significant gains were made, so you could argue a bit of a 50-50. But this time, the opportunity was specifically created by Ukrainian efforts to cut off supplies to the Russian troops in and around Kherson. They should have been ready to exploit any opportunity given to them by their own operations, and yet they failed. This is an area where you can level very legitimate criticism at the Ukrainian commanders for dropping the ball on this one yet again. Though, there is still an opportunity for them to get something worthwhile out of the situation. There might be multiple opportunities, indeed, but let us have a look at it, shall we? There must be something Ukraine can do, right? Because this is a golden opportunity. Well, the retreat of an enemy is, of course, as mentioned, always a good moment to strike, as withdrawals are hard. The Russian side will have to up and shift their command structure, reroute logistical routes, and resituate stores and supply dumps. This time without the benefits of a major city's infrastructure. They are also going to have to move hundreds of vehicles and thousands of troops across very limited and probably improvised pontoon bridges and ferries crossing the Dnieper. But again, if there is one thing the Russian army is good at, it does appear to be this. And it's not like the Ukrainian army is sitting on the city's limits ready and eager either. Their, I believe, third now offensive push into Kherson was halted not too long ago. They still have quite a fair distance to cross to the city or the riverbank and are likely reorganizing. A quick major advance would be risky, particularly as they are suspicious of a trap, and in modern warfare, as has been so handily demonstrated by combat so far, defense is a lot easier than offense. A small number of Russian rearguard troops with artillery supported from the other side of the Dnieper could make any Ukrainian advance slow, costly, and difficult. Incidentally, I consider my initial video, World War III will be a trench war, to have been quite thoroughly substantiated by now. I will also say that the fact that we are getting some social media reports of small Ukrainian units pushing up quite close to the Dnieper in certain areas suggests that there isn't really a Russian rearguard in place, which in turn suggests that all of the Russian troops are already on the other side of the river. However, it's not all doom and gloom yet. Obviously, once more, the surrender of Kherson is a tremendous political blow to Putin, but more importantly, it could place the Russian army in the Kherson region at substantial risk. Coincidentally, from the same scenario I also outlined when this was all starting to cook off. Back then it was certainly an overly optimistic idea, I admit, more so than I could have known at the time, but the observations I made then become relevant once again now. You see, the other side of the Dnieper is not over-blessed with infrastructure. There are only two major roads, the E97 and E58, running from Crimea and Melitopol respectively. There is also a railway running roughly alongside these two roads, but the railways are not connected. There is of course a smattering of lesser roads, but not in the state or number you would need to supply an army through. Now, certainly this would, and clearly has, been enough to keep the Russian forces supplied up until this point, but now both of these routes, rail and road both, will be well within range of tube and rocket artillery in their near entirety as far as the battle zone goes. The HIMARS in particular could now reach damn near all the way to Crimea, which means that Russian logistic trucks and trains will have to drive up to 90 kilometers under threat from HIMARS attacks, and they will have to drive several more under threat from direct tube artillery fire. I hope they have a lot of trucks, as they are really going to be needing it. It is very possible in this situation that continued attacks upon Russian supply lines will actually force another retreat eventually, but more dangerously, one of those major roads, E58, is connected to the rail and a road bridge that runs over the Kakhovka hydroelectric dam. With Russian forces currently in retreat and presumably in a non-ideal shape to fight, though that is a bit of a presumption, as it seems as if they might actually already have finished retreating, this could be a golden opportunity for Ukraine to try and seize the dam, which would give them access both to the other bank of the Dnieper and the Russian rear. Depending on the speed of the action, if Ukraine could recreate the largely accidental, granted, breakthrough of a month or so ago, then they could even slice straight down the middle of Russian forces in the region, threatening a move on Crimea itself. Now again, this is highly dependent on a number of factors, firstly speed and a lot of it, as over 100 kilometers of non-ideal terrain must be crossed and quickly, as the Ukrainian advance must try to beat any Russian attempt to retreat southwards. Granted, even taking just the northern side of the Crimean Bridge would be an enormous achievement, but with the potential capture of several brigade-sized formations in the pot, one would like to move swiftly. This is also dependent on the Kakhovka Dam being taken intact. Ukraine has already been shelling the road and rail connections near it, whilst trying not to hit the dam itself, with varying levels of success depending on who you're speaking with. So the state of the road and rail is unclear. Plus, if the dam is destroyed, either in the attack or by Russian demolition efforts, it would take both road and rail with it. Now, I would wire that thing to hell and back because it is an enormous military liability, but there is a couple things we must mention here, because blowing the dam will have several unfortunate consequences. Depending on the scale of the damage and the level of the river behind the dam at the time of its destruction, it could create a tidal wave of up to 5 meters or 16 feet going down the river. As you can probably imagine, this would be a very unfortunate state of affair for any small critters and or Ukrainian farmers living anywhere near the river, and would cause tremendous and very possibly hazardous flooding down pretty much the entire length of the Dnieper, obviously, and any and all tributaries as well, which, speaking of, most of those are on the Russian side of the river. And so blowing the dam would suck quite a bit for the wannabe defenders. Another consequence following the abundance of water is a lack of water. The reserve kept by the dam was used both for supplying Crimea, which would have precious few sources of water without it, and the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. Yes, they use the water to cool the nuclear reactors. I suspect I don't need to tell you that allowing a nuclear reactor to get too toasty for too long can cause its own series of sad little side effects. Thus, due to the immediate physical concerns like flooding and possible radiation, in addition to the gigantic PR backlash that will be unleashed towards the side that blows the dam, commanders on both sides will no doubt think twice before pushing the TNT plunger or placing the dam in any severe jeopardy. This hesitation might just be the edge the Ukrainian army requires, however, to take it by storm and get across and secure a sizable area on the other side safely so as to be able to bring more troops across it, as assaulting a dam is obviously not going to be particularly easy, as the Russians can cover all of the approaches to it with their own defensive batteries. And, risking the dam in a military action comes with its own potential for screwing things up royally. Luckily, for Ukraine at least, in all the confusion, even if they were to destroy the dam by accident, Russia will get blamed. Which segues me nicely onto another relevant topic, the possibility that Russia is plotting a Tom Clancy movie. I'm only half joking when I say that, as accusations from Russia to Ukraine and back again about a false flag operation has been raining down thick and heavy since the start of the war. A false flag, incidentally, in case you're unaware, is when one nation blames another for something that it actually did, usually in order to try and gain public sympathies or to outrage one's population, either against or for the cause that you are championing. But the surrender of Kherson does give a potentially unique possibility here. If, say, in the middle of the process of the city changing hands, the confusion as one army is leaving and another is entering, if someone were to sneak a few dudes in a truck with a large box into a nondescript part of the city and set a little timer, then how could anyone possibly know who they were or even that they had ever been there when whatever it is happens? Since the contents of the box can be, so many interesting things. There was, for example, the alleged US bioweapons lab in Ukraine. I say alleged because, much like the COVID and the masks story, this one has undergone quite a bit of truth restructuring is the term I like to use these days, as some say the lab is there, they've got evidence for it, and others say no, that's a myth, and a conservative one at that. God help me, a conservative myth too, even worse. I particularly find it amusing, by the way, that pretty much everyone seems to use the exact same picture. oh well, but the point is, if a biological weapon was to suddenly be released through unknown means in Kherson, well, I know who Russia would blame. There have also been talks of a dirty bomb, which, yet again, both sides accusing the other one of planning to plant. With Russia, of course, saying that Ukraine has scientists who could make our dirty bomb, and obviously it's unthinkable that Russia would do the same. Yes, of course. Both sides would never think of doing this, as both sides are planning to do it. Yes, it really does end up with just simply who you believe at this point, and there's the problem as well, though. Before that, actually, let me clarify one thing here, as this is often confused. A dirty bomb does not refer to a nuclear bomb, which is again a common misconception. It is instead a regular old bomb with nuclear materials worked into the explosives or around it, designed to spread radiation via the contaminated materials rather than, achieving an actual nuclear explosion. It's a very significant difference, as one leaves a crater a few dozen kilometers wide and the other a crater like 5 meters wide. Though the intent there is of course to irradiate the area as well. There was also an idea that I saw, which was that of Russia hiding an actual nuke somewhere, and maybe hoping to blow up a major Ukrainian formation or two, supposedly, as it wandered into the city. But unless Russia has buried like half a dozen tac nukes along the roadside, this would seem unlikely, as the damage done by one tactical nuclear warhead in a city the size of Kherson wouldn't really be militarily that significant. It would cause a tremendous amount of outrage, however, and here's the thing as well. I don't think there is too much of a chance of a false flag attack, at least not a Russian one, for the simple reason that if no one knows who did it, Russia did it. Hell, we are currently at the point that even if Ukraine did do a false flag, Russia would probably still be blamed. As Russia has, they have squandered any goodwill they ever potentially did have. In fact, they've gone so far into the negative now that Zelensky could literally light a puppy on fire on live television and then hold up a picture of Putin and go, "How could you do that?" And Putin's favorability ratings would drop. I'm not saying that the Ukrainians will do it. This doesn't understand me correctly here. I'm just saying that even if a prominent Western individual was to say that something would blow up, I don't know, like perhaps the President of the United States,
there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that exactly, since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control?
We will, I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
Then even if that thing were to blow up, we would totally not know who did it. Oh, this is another dangerous topic, isn't it? Let's move swiftly along. Whilst I do see some potential for an exploitation of the Russian retreat, assuming the moment hasn't passed already, to perhaps race across the hydroelectric dam, if the Russians are allowed to get settled in, then this will almost certainly lead to a far more static situation in southern Ukraine, as defending a major natural obstacle like the Dnieper is very, very easy, and in all due likelihood the Ukrainians won't even try to cross it, and instead simply move troops to other more promising fronts, even as Russia is likely to do the same. There is of course always the possibility of an amphibious operation, but whilst Ukraine has proven to be far more competent in that regard than Russia, it would still be an enormous risk to take, and one very likely to backfire dramatically, as it's not enough to just get to the other side. You also have to transport enough men, materials, and supplies over there continuously to hold the other side. And should you fail, a bunch of your own troops are now cut off. That's a lot of risk for not a whole lot of reward. So my final analysis right now, bearing in mind that Ukraine has only now really started to react, and we'll see over the next couple of days whether or not they're able to make any major moves out of this, but my prediction is that the Russian troops have already probably withdrawn, they're probably already in position on the other bank, and Ukraine might poke a little bit just to see, but we are unlikely to see any major movement on this front, well, forever now. Or, well, more correctly, until Ukraine might be able to force another retreat via logistical matters, as the Russian supply situation is now very, very vulnerable to attrition. And this might see another big opportunity emerge in the not too distant future. That, however, along with the potential fate of the dam and the nuclear power plant, we'll have to wait for another day. Until then, I've been Arj. Thank you all very much for watching, and hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.